We are now over halfway through the college football season, which is crazy to me, and today I'm going to go through all the remaining big-time teams and talk about whether I think they are a fraud or legit. It's pretty self-explanatory, so we're just going to talk about whether the team is good or not, and if I think they're going to make the playoff. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. But before we do, be sure to take a quick moment to subscribe, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what topic I should cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first team that I think is legit is Tennessee. They ended up falling to Arkansas a couple weeks ago in a thriller, but besides that, the Volunteers have really started to look legit. They beat two ranked teams in both Oklahoma and NC State, both of which really aren't looking that good anymore, but they also dismantled every other team they played, and after a scare against Florida, they most recently knocked off number 7 Alabama. Yes, the Tide are looking a little bit fraudulent right now, but the Volunteers have a legit defense, a superstar in Dylan Sampson at running back, and I think they're getting enough out of Nico to warrant them probably getting to the playoff, and if they can just win 4 of their last 5 games, I think they sneak in. Okay, so our first fraud is going to be the Pitt Panthers. Yes, I like Pitt football, and they have some decent wins over Cincinnati, West Virginia, and most recently Cal, but honestly, their luck is going to run out at some point. 3 of those 4 games they could have easily lost if not for great luck, and it seems like they have a daunting schedule to finish the year. Road games against SMU and Louisville aren't going to be easy, Syracuse is looking pretty good, and I don't think there's any chance that they beat Clemson. With how their luck has gone, I think things are going to fall apart and they're going to finish at probably 9-3 or 10-2, and that would lead them out of the playoff. On another hand, a team that I think is legit is the Clemson Tigers. After getting blasted 34-3 in week 1 against number 1 Georgia, the Tigers have done nothing but dominate since then. Cade Klubnik and Dabo took all that criticism to heart and destroyed App State, destroyed NC State, destroyed Stanford, beat Florida State, killed Wake Forest, and most recently took care of Virginia at home. While none of those wins really pop off the page, Clemson is absolutely dominating their opponents right now, and with their toughest game being on the road against number 19 Pitt, they, in my opinion, have a schedule to finish at 11-1 and get to the ACC Championship and get to the college football playoff, and no one would have thought that after that week 1 loss to Georgia. Week 8 of the NFL season is now upon us, and as a Colts fan, I've been watching how Anthony Richards has been playing, and I'm not quite impressed with them. That's why this weekend, if I were to place a bet, I would say that the Texans are going to easily beat the Colts. But if you're as convicted as I am about a certain bet, be sure to place your bet with MyBookie. This season, MyBookie is pulling out all the stops with incredible promotions like a weekly risk-free boost on Thursdays where you can bet without a sweat. If your bet hits, you win big. If it doesn't, forget it. MyBookie will refund your wager. But that's just the beginning. MyBookie is giving away hundreds of thousands in prizes with their Super Survivor and Square contests. Get your entries now in for your shot at huge cash rewards. When you're ready to get started, be sure to use my promo code Fisher50 and make sure to get some extra cash on top of your first deposit. If you type in Fisher50, you'll get up to $1,000 in a welcome bonus bet plus a $10 casino chip. MyBookie's tiered bonuses make it easy to deposit with crypto or with credit, and the bigger your deposit, the bigger your bonus. The bonus would be 100% match up to $1,000 plus a $10 casino chip. With MyBookie, you can bet on anything, anywhere, at any time, and make your season a winning season. Be sure to check out my link down below and use my promo code Fisher50. So another team I currently think is fraudulent are the Duke Blue Devils. Yes, Manny Diaz and Malik Murphy have done a solid job in their first season there, but so far they haven't beat anyone. They barely beat North Carolina, UConn, and Northwestern, who are all terrible, lost to Georgia Tech, and their only decent win comes against Florida State, who really isn't a decent win. Duke has gotten off to a deceptive 6-1 start, and while it's great they made a bowl game, I don't know how many of these last few games they win. I think they're going to lose to both SMU and Miami in these next 2 weeks, and games against NC State, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest aren't gimmies either. Duke could go anywhere from 7-5 to 9-3, but I don't see them being a legit playoff contender right now. Okay, I promise after this we're going to be done with the ACC. Miami, in my opinion, is legit. Yes, some people think the ACC has bent the rules to get them to where they are, but I have different reasons why I think Miami is legit. Their defense isn't that great, but their offense is insane. Xavier Restrepo, Damian Martinez, and Cam Ward are a 3-headed monster we have not seen in Miami for quite some time, and back-to-back road victories against both Cal and Louisville have been impressive. The rest of their schedule isn't all that great either, as their 2 toughest games are on the road against Georgia Tech and Syracuse, both of which are winnable. Miami has a legit shot of going 12-0, and I think they're going to get to the ACC Championship and eventually to the playoff. Honestly, I think the BYU Cougars are legit. Wins against SMU and K-State have been quite impressive, and then they also recently beat Arizona. I know the Wildcats are kind of in free fall mode right now, but BYU is currently 7-0, and right now they have a lot of good wins, and should be able to finish out the season strong. They'll play against 5 teams who are currently at the bottom of the Big 12, and as long as BYU goes 12-1, I think they'll get a shot and get into the playoff. On the other hand, I think Iowa State is somewhat of a fraud. They've gotten lucky a couple times this season. They barely beat number 21 Iowa, survived against West Virginia, and also most recently should have lost to UCF. Yes, the Cyclones are also 7-0, but honestly, I see them dropping a game or two towards the end of the year and potentially missing out on the playoff. I could see them losing to Cincinnati, Utah, or Kansas State, and I would not pick them to win the Big 12 championship right now. Iowa State is obviously good, and Matt Campbell deserves credit, but I think for now they are playoff frauds. The final team from the Big 12 we're going to talk about is K-State. Everyone was talking about Avery Johnson all offseason, and so far he's really only had one terrible showing, and that was against BYU. Wins against Tulane, Arizona, Oklahoma State, Colorado, and West Virginia have propelled the Wildcats to a good 6-1 start so far, and right now they have a pretty easy schedule as well. They play Kansas and Houston, and Arizona State is also falling towards the bottom of the conference, and then those last 2 games against Cincinnati and Iowa State will determine the year. I think Kansas State is a legitimate team, but we'll just see if they can finish out strong. Honestly, it seems that the Indiana Hoosiers might actually be legit. Yes, they have played a somewhat weak schedule so far, but Curt Cignetti has had Indiana playing extremely tough, and they just gave Nebraska their second worst loss since joining the Big Ten. To finish out the season, Indiana only has really one huge matchup, as that comes on the road against number 4 Ohio State. As no offense, until Michigan finds a quarterback, I'm not considering them the threat for anything. Purdue and Michigan State will be near the bottom of the conference, Washington and Michigan come at home, and everyone's eyes are going to be on that Indiana-Ohio State game. If IU goes 11-1, they are in the college football playoff. Oregon, in my opinion, is also the most legit team in college football, as they had early wins against Boise State and Oregon State, and then most recently have been on a tear, pulling a shutout on the road for the first time since the 90s, beating Ohio State in a thriller, and drubbing Michigan State at home. Dylan Gabriel is playing his way into the Heisman conversation, and Oregon football is legit. Penn State, in my eyes, is also legit. They'll have 2 difficult games coming up against Wisconsin and Ohio State, but outside of that, Penn State should be able to cruise to at least a 10-2 record. I think ultimately they're going to lose to Ohio State, but 11-1 would be good enough to get them into the playoff conversation. The Illinois win keeps looking better and better for them, and Penn State has seemingly figured it out this year. Ultimately, I think Illinois is going to end up being fraudulent because I don't think the Big Ten gets 4 teams into the playoff. Yes, Illinois had an impressive win against number 24 Michigan, but the Wolverines aren't all that good, and we'll find out a lot more as they play on the road against number 1 Oregon this week. If they somehow beat the Ducks, then Illinois is legitimately on the path to the playoff, but if they lose, I think it's hard for them to get in at 10-2. Illinois is a good football team, but ultimately I think they're going to be left out of the playoff bracket. Ohio State, on the other hand, is in an interesting spot. Their best win right now is against Iowa, and they lost to the only decent team they played on their schedule, Oregon. Yes, it was a 1-point game, but many are questioning Will Howard, and many are wondering if they can get through the rest of the season. Games against Penn State and Indiana will be difficult for them, and the Michigan game will also be difficult because it's an arch rivalry matchup. Ultimately, I will pick Ohio State to go out undefeated and end up finishing on 11-1 with a playoff appearance, but if they don't get a big win here soon, they're bordering on the line of being fraudulent in my eyes. I gotta be honest, I honestly think Texas A&M is still fraudulent. Yes, they had one good game where they beat the brakes off of Mizzou, but besides that, they haven't exactly impressed me. And they barely beat Florida, Bowling Green, and Arkansas, and most recently only won by 10 against Mississippi State. That Mizzou game is really holding up their resume, and it's going to be hard for them to survive as they have games against both LSU and Texas, and South Carolina has also proved to be a tough out. A&M's looking at going anywhere between 8-4 and 11-1, and ultimately I think they're going to be 9-3 or 10-2, which would hold them out of the playoff, labeling them as fraudulent. LSU, on the other hand, has started to figure things out, and honestly, I think that they're actually legit. They have a difficult remaining schedule, though, as they play 3 ranked teams, as currently they play A&M, Alabama, and Vanderbilt. I think LSU actually wins all 3 of those matchups, and then they'll also get wins against both Florida and Oklahoma, and I think LSU goes 11-1 and ends up making the college football playoff some way, shape, or form, after however the SEC championship goes. Number 2, Georgia is 100% legit. They have some pretty good wins as they beat the brakes off of Clemson in week 1 and most recently went on the road and beat Texas. They also have wins against Auburn, Kentucky, and Mississippi State, and their worst performance of the year was that Bama game, but they ended up almost coming back and winning it. That's the one blemish on Georgia's resume, and to finish out the year, they play Florida, Ole Miss, Tennessee, UMass, and Georgia Tech. The Ole Miss and Tennessee games are worth circling, but honestly, I think Georgia also wins out, and I think they play LSU in the SEC championship game. My Missouri Tigers are unfortunately fraudulent. After winning their first 2 games in shutout fashion, the last 5 weeks have not gone well for Mizzou. They barely beat Auburn this past Saturday and had to convert a 4th down to win. Vanderbilt had to miss a field goal, and they also had to come back against Boston College. Sandwiched between that is a horrific loss to Texas A&M, and Mizzou is flirting with disaster right now. If they can somehow go on the road and beat number 15 Alabama this Saturday, then they'll probably end up being legit, but I'm also worried about games against South Carolina and Arkansas, and Oklahoma probably won't be a pushover either. I think Mizzou ends up probably going 9-3, as I've lost a lot of faith in them over the weeks. Texas right now is both legit and fraudulent. Their best 2 wins are Oklahoma and Michigan, and neither of them are looking that good anymore, and sandwiched between those are a bunch of games against nobodies. This past weekend, they got exposed by number 5 Georgia at home, but still the rest of Texas's schedule isn't too bad. If they can beat number 25 Vanderbilt this upcoming weekend, which I think they will, then they'll be fine, and then they'll probably be able to cruise against Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, but that Texas A&M game could be a trap one. We'll have to wait and see how the Aggies continue to play, but with just one blemish on the resume, Texas deserves some benefit of the doubt, and I still think they're legit. So the final team we're going to touch on today is the Alabama Crimson Tide, and the Tide are frauds this year. Under new head coach Kalen DeBoer, many expected the Tide to be the same as usual, but in the last couple weeks, they have fallen apart. They have that huge win against number 2 Georgia and a road victory against Wisconsin, but since then they lost at home to Vanderbilt, got lucky and beat South Carolina, and most recently lost to Tennessee. Bama could easily be 4-3 right now, and while their schedule does lighten up a bit, I still think they're fraudulent. They get a chance to play number 21 Mizzou this upcoming weekend, but as I said earlier, I think they're going to lose to LSU, which would eliminate them from the playoff discussion. It would make their peak 9-3. Honestly, I expected the Tide to probably go 9-3 or 10-2 this year, and that's what they're on track to do, but I think the Tide are frauds and won't end up making the playoff after all. So yeah, today I went through the conferences and some of the main teams and talked about who I thought was a fraud and who was legit. What do you agree and disagree with? And also be sure to let me know your thoughts down below. Go place the bet at MyBookie and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.